today on Ag News Daily.
The farmer has to enter every season optimistic. We can't go in here March 4th, March 5th and say, hey, this is going to be a bad year, right? We want to approach it with optimism. I think there's a lot of opportunity moving forward. A lot of the technology we've seen here at the show, a lot of the stuff that Helena Products Group and others are putting forth. We're trying to give farmers every chance to gain that advantage, so we're looking forward to it.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily Show. This is Tanner, and hanging out with Michelle this week as we just got back from Commodity Classic in Denver. How you doing, Michelle?
Good. It kind of feels nice outside, but we got dumped on by a lot of snow, so...
Yeah, it doesn't look like a lot of snow on the ground here, but we had such high winds in central Iowa. Made travels back difficult. Had to fly into Kansas City and drive up to Des Moines, which was not a part of the plan, but we're still here, home safe and sound. This week's weather brought some snow and strong winds with this resulting blizzard conditions across most of the Midwest. Looking ahead, we do have two more systems that are expected to move through next week. A second system arriving late into the weekend has potential to be a significant storm. For more insights on the short-term weather outlook, we had the opportunity that at Commodity Classic earlier this week to talk to Eric Snodgrass. So let's jump into that update with the conversation Delaney had right now.
Super excited to be sitting here with Eric Snodgrass, Science Fellow with Nutrient Ag Solutions. Eric, I love chatting weather with you. You make it such an interesting and dynamic topic. I want to start a little bit here with just a short range forecast. Sure. If we're looking out here the next couple of weeks, we're seeing growers in Texas getting started with planting. Not quite ready to roll here in the Midwest yet, but what's your short-term forecast?
Well, the good news is it doesn't look like what we've been talking about for weeks, which has been access to really cold air and really dry air. And so the near-term thing is we've got a pretty potent couple of systems coming through. One will be right at the end of this show. We're going to have on Tuesday a pretty massive storm system. I don't like the severe weather side of it. I don't like the snow. Well, let me rephrase that. I do actually like the snow on the northern side of it because we need some moisture in the northern plains, upper Midwest. But as it comes through, it's going to rip through pretty quick. I'm very concerned about just how much damage we could get out of this early March line. And there's another one, follows about 3 or 4 days later. To be honest, Delaney, if you left it up to me, I would have 2 of these a week for the next 5 weeks.
Wow. And
the only reason for that is we have some underlying drought things that need corrected. So to see an active early-term forecast here, I have to say I'm pretty happy with it. I think it's going to make a mess for when we all try to leave the convention, though. So, yeah, that's the near term.
I was just thinking, for those of us that might be headed up into the mountains after the show, are we going to get some fresh powder? Are we going to have nice skiing conditions?
Better. The Colorado Basin right now is actually doing okay. They're at about 85% of the normal snowpack, which is good because you think about the Colorado River and how it eventually flows down to the Baja. We need to have that whole basin with plenty of water. And it's kind of just telling of where the water is going to be because you think about it, the North Platte, the South Platte come out of that same area. And if I just think about the broader water issues going on right now, these systems coming up are kind of what we need. We just need them. We needed them last month, and we need them to not last beyond about, the first couple weeks of April so we can get into the fields, get some work done. But active is the name of it here in the near term.
Well, stay tuned. We're going to get a full weather rundown here from Eric in just a few short weeks. But Eric, thanks for joining for a brief weather update this week on the podcast.
Yeah, you bet.
As Snodgrass mentioned, some attendees faced challenges returning home from Denver due to that weather. Meanwhile, Delaney may encounter more snowfall in the Colorado mountains as she spends a couple of days skiing or snowboarding or maybe falling down, whatever it might be.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
As mentioned earlier, we were at Commodity Classic this week. We had many great conversations. This year was close to a record, as unofficial numbers have over 11,300 attendees compared to last year's record-breaking attendance at 11,500. So we'll see if we can get that record broken or not. But let's turn it over to a conversation that you had, Michelle, talking to farmers and what they learned at this year's event.
There were gloves, hats, pens, koozies, anything you name it at this year's Commodity Classic in Denver, Colorado, bringing a lot of farmers together, seeing technology, the race car, so many cool things at this year's event, and many conversations on Ag News Daily these upcoming few weeks, those conversations you won't want to miss. But let's hear it from the farmers and those people who were here at what they learned at this year's event.
Learned a lot about some of the biological stuff that's still coming out, and I mean, it's new to everybody, I think, still, so learning more about that. There's obviously several different things. My wife's a bookkeeper as well, so we've been looking at some of the different software that's specifically designed for farm use. So that's kind of interesting. I don't know, there's plenty of niche things here, as well as the big companies and the new technologies. So we're just here to take it all in.
The one thing I learned, I came to learn a little bit more about fungicides, and through that I've learned that kind of maybe we need to change up our program a little bit and try some different fungicides, try to retain the yield and keep the disease down. With BASF and Syngenta, learned a couple new ways to do things.
I really got to learn how impactful AI is becoming in the industry and how we're going to have to start leaning on that, and how we're introducing farmers to those new concepts. And there's some people who are in this space and really excited for the change, some people who are a little more hesitant, but this industry is growing so super fast, so it's super exciting.
Well, I guess talk to the rep for John Deere about the new 700 series combine, found out a few things that are very interesting, so it's quite a big show.
Well, we come to the show just to interact with other farmers and vendors and see what's new and upcoming, and it was a great show. So, some of of course, the tariff talk and everything like that. It's fun to hear other people's views of that and opinions of that, and it's on everyone's mind right now. So that's what we enjoyed the most of it, just interacting with that. So, yes, lots of new technology. We're primarily Deere, and Deere had a really nice exhibit, and it was great.
Again, you won't want to miss those conversations that are happening on Ag News Daily these next few weeks.
Well, it was a fun event, but there was a lot of tariff talk. Gave a lot of people to have a lot of conversations about it. The value of U.S. agricultural exports in fiscal year 2025 is projected to drop to its lowest level in 5 years, according to the USDA. The agency estimates that total shipments this year will be valued at $170.5 billion, the lowest since 2020. Reuters reports that the tariff actions have sparked new trade conflicts with the U.S. three largest trading partners, potentially disrupting more than $2 trillion in two-way trade. According to the American Farm Bureau Federation Senior Director of Government Affairs, Mexico accounts for $30 billion in U.S. agriculture exports annually, followed by Canada at $29 billion and China at approximately $24 billion. Together, these three countries make up half of all U.S. agriculture exports.
Well, we had many great sessions out at this year's Commodity Classic, but shortly before the event, it was announced that U.S. Secretary of Ag Brooke Rollins was going to be in attendance. So we captured a couple of sound bites from this week's press conference at the event. We're going to share those with you here.
I've now been on the job just over 2 weeks, and it's been incredible. Been to 5 or 6 states now, I think, talked to hundreds and hundreds of our farmers and ranchers. We've already released some pretty major plans, made some big announcements. I'm sure a lot of you have tracked that. But there's a lot more coming. We're moving on Trump time. Some of you may have seen. We've moved very quickly, but it's the honor of a lifetime to be in this role. Secretary Kennedy and I have already begun building a strong relationship, a great, hopefully, partnership where we can work together, where we begin to move forward. And perhaps I can spend a little time making sure that he understands that some of the things maybe that he has been told or believed or has read isn't entirely accurate, and the importance of ensuring that our farmers and our ranchers and that really America understands the importance of things like pesticides and others to ensure that we are able to continue to feed America and frankly to feed the world. I feel confident. I feel very, very confident. I'm very encouraged that as we work to make America healthy again, we will be able to do it in a very intentional way that not only does it compromise our farmers and our ranchers and our ag community, but actually helps to elevate and make more prosperous than ever before. I know that's where President Trump stands, and I, of course, stand along with him to effectuate that vision. Listen, our farmers are the original conservationists. There's no doubt about that. Our revolution was fought by farmers 250 years ago. They are the best purveyors and preservationists of the land, that we are looking at everything line by line by line. Our chief of staff is the incredible Kelly Buller. She is here. She's really leading that effort. And I feel confident that as we look to right size the USDA and all of the agencies across the government, as we look to realign the agency to better serve our farmers and our ranchers as we look to move out things like diversity, equity, and inclusion and progressive, quote, progressive ideals in terms of how we move money out. Those days are over. Now we look to really focus on those that are truly feeding this country and the world. I think it is no surprise to anyone in this room that the pace at which President Trump is currently meeting with world leaders, some of those meetings go better than others, as we saw on Friday. But I think as we see that, for me personally, and I hope for the audience that you all represent and why you're here, you hopefully are encouraged that while we're entering probably some tense trade negotiation moments and days and perhaps weeks and maybe even months, that the place of President Trump, Vice President Vance, and America in the world, I believe, is strengthening every day. And I do think that is going to give us some really good opportunity to strike some of these deals to ensure that we are expanding that market access. So there are so many different pieces on the chess board, thank you, that are being moved around right now. And it is a bit of a game of three-dimensional chess. This is an extremely aggressive effort that I fully support. But in being so aggressive, there will be mistakes made. And there have been mistakes made. I think in the first tranche, we let go, as part of those cuts, some of the avian flu experts. And immediately, Kaylee brought them back. And have done that. I was down at the Borlaug Institute in College Station on Friday, looking at all of their great researchers, and the three scientists that greeted me, some of the world's most renowned agriculture researchers that the Borlaug Institute and Texas A&M had recruited, were also given the pig slip. But within a few days or a week, they too were brought back. So that is, I think, a really important part of this as we're moving at Trump speed, that there will be some mistakes made and that we will fully take responsibility for it and recognize it when that happens.
Well, when you're talking about the federal government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has announced plans to terminate leases for 59 farm service agencies and natural resources conservation service offices as part of the cost-cutting initiative, according to the Department of Government Efficiency's website. The lease terminations will affect 36 NRCS offices, 13 FSA offices, and 11 rural housing service offices. Some of the closures will include state offices like Alaska and Kentucky, while others will impact county field offices. According to Dodge, the USDA expects the lease terminations to generate significant cost savings, including over $9.7 million from FSA state and county offices, more than $19.3 million from NRCS offices, and approximately $8.6 million from rural housing services offices. Dr. Amy Hagerman, an agricultural and food policy specialist with Oklahoma State University Extension, warns that these closures could lead to staffing shortages, making it more difficult to administer USDA programs efficiently. She stated, as we begin to lose USDA employees, this will create gaps across the state, making it harder to get programs out the door. We need to be conscious, she said, of that and patient with these offices while may suddenly find themselves short-staffed. So as those deadlines come up here, especially spring planting and the summer, connecting those dots with the programs that farmers are involved in, just watch out for that as you make those connections.
That's right. We did see a little bit of good news, though, this week. The International Longshoremen Association, ILA, has given their final approval for a new 6-year contract agreement with the U.S. Maritime Alliance. The contract will take effect on October 1st, 2024, and run through September 30th, 2030. It was overwhelmingly approved by nearly 99% of the ILA members. The ILA president, Harold Daggett, who led the union's negotiations, stated that he was pleased to announce that thousands of longshoremen workers overwhelmingly supported this contract, and now they have labor peace for at least the next 6 years. This agreement includes a record 62% wage increase full protections against automation, enhancements to the union's healthcare plan, and several other benefits. Daggett also commended USMX's lead negotiator, Paul DeMaria, for his role in reaching this settlement. So commended that leader there, Michelle.
Well, another area of news, we're talking mycotoxins. Alltech has released its complete 2024 U.S. harvest analysis report, highlighting how a combination of heavy early season rains and late season droughts created significant challenges for U.S. crop producers. The report also indicates that the overall risk of mycotoxin contamination remains moderate to high. Mycotoxins, natural substances produced by molds and fungi, are a growing concern in agriculture. Currently, more than 95% of crops are contaminated with at least one mycotoxin, often with 2 or more. Because mycotoxins are difficult to detect, they can cause serious harm to animal health before producers even realize they are present. The company's data proactive mycotoxin management program is essential, beginning with identifying the highest risk mycotoxins in specific regions, crops, and livestock species. Dr. Max Hawkins of Alltech, who is on the mycotoxin management team, stated corn grain and silage risk is somewhat higher across all regions of the U.S. than in 2023.
Well, we had many great conversations at Commodity Classic as we started sharing with you, and we will over the next couple of weeks. One of those was with Helena. We discussed more about their government regulations and new post-emergence adjuvant. So let's get into that conversation for you today.
We're excited to be down here in Commodity Classic once again, chatting today with a few folks from Helena about some interesting policy and other issues. We're chatting today with Sean McCarty, the Director of Government Affairs for Helena, and Austin Anderson, the Brand Manager of Adjuvants and Water Management at HPG. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this morning.
I appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Before we get into a little bit of some of the topics we want to cut into here today, let's get a little bit more about each of your backgrounds and a little bit of what you do within each of your roles.
Oh, you want me to start? My name's Austin Anderson. I started with Helena just a little bit over 2 years ago, and I have a pretty unique job within Helena and HPG where I get to see product concepts all the way from, hey, this would be a good product concept, all the way till fully finished and everything in between. So I deal a lot with marketing, positioning, pricing, all the fun stuff that goes along with the launching new products and having products in our own portfolio.
So if we need a discount, we're coming to you.
I mean, I don't see why not.
And so I actually started in the Helena Products Group 20 years ago, and then moved into a sales representative role on the Eastern Shore of Maryland and Virginia, and ran a branch out there. And then about 10 years ago, Helena created their own government affairs department to advocate not only for Helena, but our customers and the interests that we see arising in an ever-changing market. And so I've done that for the last 10 years, trying to be the best liaison I can be between not only the agencies that regulate us, but also the officials that represent us at the state and federal level.
Just to ask a quick follow-up, Sean, I know we're going to get into some of the issues Helena's focused on, but that seems like a big jump to go from a sales type of role into government affairs. How and why did you make that jump?
I was a bit uncertain as to how it would go, but what you find is that policy and public policy and advocating for public policy isn't a whole lot different than calling on a farmer. That trust, that relationship isn't built in the first meeting. You've got to go up and down the driveway a bunch. You got to sit there and talk about everything that has nothing to do with farming for a while, talk about the schools and the weather and T-ball and all that. And after 4 or 5 meetings, you start to build that relationship, and then it's just a matter of selling the policy versus selling whatever fertilizer or seed or chemical. So it wasn't that big of a leap, but the travel surely kicked up a little bit.
I just think it's funny that that's what you picked up on. I was listening to the introduction, trying to do the math in my head, and I go, there's no way he's old enough to have 40 years of experience.
He started when he was 15.
It definitely had to be a child labor law issue.
That's farming, right? We start early.
That's right. So, Austin, as we're sitting here and having this conversation, you've got to experience Commodity Classic the last couple of days. When we get to talk to you, but our listeners also get to live vicariously through us at this event. As you're meeting growers and having other conversations, what's been top of their mind?
Well, it's putting 2024 behind us and starting on 2025. So, there seems to be a lot of uncertainty about, what 2025 is going to bring us. But, what's been interesting has been the excitement to get started, right? It's like the weather's starting to turn in certain parts of the world, and I think we're all excited for what 2025 is going to have in store for us.
Yeah.
And one of the things 2025 has in store for Helena customers is your new adjuvant product, Cohort. Tell us a little bit more about that product launch.
So it's something really exciting. So, we know that we've had some regulatory issues around like dicamba and vacating registrations and stuff. And so we get to a situation where growers are going to have to rely on maybe some old tools in the toolbox like Liberty and other products like that. And so what we thought about is how can we make herbicides like that work more efficiently, more effectively, and more consistently. And so we were able to bring out something like Cohort that's really going to change the game for those of you that are using Liberty out in the marketplace.
Sean, since you're on the regulatory side too, it's interesting, I think, to know what goes into getting some of those tools in the toolbox to light.
Yeah, especially, the pesticides we know today, that timeline has grown exceedingly long. We're probably in the neighborhood of 12 to 13 years to get a new active ingredient registered, potentially longer if some of the budget cuts and downsizing at the government level hinder the ability to get new products approved. But also, there's a number of label amendments and small changes, adding certain crops to the label or new sources of an existing product that maybe took 2 to 3 months, and now we're at 2 to 3 years. And so we're trying to find other solutions. We talk about our adjuvant technology and other ways. Okay, if we can't get something registered in time or we can't make these changes, what's another way to solve that problem? And perhaps it's taking some of our adjuvant technology and other products that Helena Products puts forth, and if we put them together with the existing products, can we solve the problem that way?
Yeah, I think it's clear the reason the two of you are sitting here together. Like you definitely have to play off of each other, especially as products like this new release is you want to get into place.
Absolutely.
So as you've talked to farmers here and had these conversations about Cohort, what's the sentiment around that? Is it a nice level of excitement?
Well, we've got a lot of momentum with our internal customers and a lot of our wholesale dealers that are, here at the show, and, growers are starting to look at, hey, they've kind of already picked out what seed maybe they want to plant. So now they're kind of thinking about the next progression of, what farming has in store. And so you're thinking about herbicide programs and stuff like that. And so growers are really asking questions like, how can I help eliminate, these situations where, hey, I had a little bit less of a performance that I'd like to see, how can I, supercharge that and those sorts of things. So really being able to think about it from the standpoint of being able to get your most bang for your buck, right?
Yeah, and every dollar matters.
Yeah,
especially in an environment where we're currently at, and it's nice to be able to describe and show and demonstrate that value.
Well, what I've been telling people all the time is, the most expensive application you're going to make is one that doesn't work or is not as effective as you want it to be. And so there's a lot of temptation about cutting back on fertilizer, cutting back on a lot of things. And, what we're thinking about at Helena is like, how can we make a full, well-rounded agronomic recommendation, and how can we make that work on a higher percentage of the time? And, we all know that, 2-inch weeds aren't always 2-inch weeds, right? And so making sure that we can really get to that point where, we're not sacrificing yield for, untimely situations that come up.
Mm-hmm. So it's a post-emergent adjuvant. Walk us through a little bit more about some of the R&D. I'm sure it's been a long runway to get here.
So what's kind of cool about, I told you a little bit about what I do is at HPG. It's like, we get to see it from all the way to the infant stages, and, we do a lot of R&D testing. So, it's been in the works for, the last 3 years or so. And, we've had the chance to test it at over 50 different locations across 19 states. So it's one of those where we know the ins and outs, ups and downs of what the Cohort will bring to products that need AMS, or if you want a little bit more activity, they've got AMS on the label. So it's really been a really rewarding journey to get to where we are now. So
Sean, with the fact that Helena knows the ins and outs, does that make your role easier?
No, nothing makes it easier. It's but obviously, when we look out and try and identify what are the challenges, not only that companies like Helena are facing, but most of our solutions at the Helena Products Group arise from grower concerns. I've got a problem. How do I solve this? And then we go back to lab and kind of work through it. And then it's a matter of, okay, now from an approval process, do we stand a chance? And what's the timeline? And from an ROI standpoint, will this work?
Yeah, I'm not sure if surprised is the right word, but when I saw Endangered Species Act on our list of things maybe to cover during this interview. I was a little taken aback, and I was, reading through, and I was like, okay, that's making more sense about how that is a relevant issue to Helena. But make that connection for our listeners.
It's a relevant issue to the country. So the EPA is designed to protect the environment. Obviously, they regulate pesticides, which are designed to kill herbicides, or kill weeds, insects, diseases. And for quite a while now, the EPA was not doing the proper consultation with the Fish and Wildlife Services and the National Marine Fisheries. Those are the services they're supposed to work with to identify, could this active ingredient that we're registering or we're reviewing, because every ingredient has a 15-year regulatory review, adversely impact the habitat, the life of the species, and if so, then they have to make mitigations. Well, they weren't really doing that, and it led to a lot of litigation. They grouped all that litigation together. They settled it in 2023, and the end result was the EPA came out with a work plan and said, okay, we're gonna develop these herbicide strategies, insecticide strategies for what registrants of materials and growers or users can do to eliminate most of the opportunity, the chance for an unintended take or jeopardizing a species. So the end result is labels moving forward. We've got one product out there today. We'll have a number of others that go through the process in 2025. And over time, dozens of products will turn into hundreds of products, and it will be all of the herbicides that are subject to this new protocol. They will have a point system on the label. Now, they may not have any. They could have 3, 6, 9 points. They will also have increased wind or drift and buffer mitigations, whether that's by ground or air. And finally, they'll have a pesticide use limitation area. So they'll have to go online to the EPA's Bulletin's Live 2 website within 6 months of the application, type in the registration number, the EPA registration number for that herbicide, and see, am I farming? Is any of my ground in one of these polygons that has been created through the mapping work with EPA and USDA and others to say, okay, here's the area of concern for a species. We need to add additional mitigations to the application, whether that's calendar or use rate. So most farmers, most users will be able to get to that point system. Much of the country will have some default 2 to 3 points just based on their geography and topography. But it's going to be a significant amount of planning when you look at all the farms and the fields that you operate on. And once you get used to it, I don't think it will be that tiresome. But early on, the adjustment period will be a little rough.
And you said, how far away are we from seeing that implemented?
So the herbicide strategy was finalized. Mm-hmm. So we have one herbicide today that has gone through the new active ingredient registration that is already out there. There's a number of others moving forward for 25 that will be registered. We also have hundreds of products that are due for their regulatory review. So when they get reviewed and they get a new registration or a reviewed registration, they will then have that opportunity. Insecticides, if you asked me 3 or 4 months ago, I'd say probably the end of 2025, we would have that system in place. But we've seen a pause on a lot of federal work. There's a lot of communications about, do we want to tweak this? Do we want to change this? So it's possible the insecticide piece gets pushed back a little bit further. Same with the fungicides. So as of today, it's only herbicides.
Yeah, that was a lot, and I appreciate you sharing that with us because from a producer hat, that sounds like a lot of responsibility that's going to fall on my shoulders going forward to make sure that I'm doing this correctly. Obviously, you should read and follow label destruction. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and it's the applicator making that application. Ultimately, that's where it sits. The label is the law, and you're going to look at the label. The additional wrinkles are you're going to have to hop off the label to look at, okay, how do I hit these points? Here's a chart of my runoff and erosion. I do this, this, and this. When you go to the pesticide use limitation area, as long as you do it within 6 months, but you're going to need to do it. You're going to have to look at every herbicide you use, type in that registration number, and know, does this put me in any sort of extra measure that I've got to take? So it's a little bit more complicated. The downside, and they said this when they were developing it, is we allow litigation to move forward with vacatures, and we lose the pesticides altogether.
Yeah, so I don't know if you guys are the right person to ask this question, but we've been asked this a lot from the folks that have come up and greeted us because we're sitting here and looking at some new technology. It's across the industry as far as application goes with the See and Spray type application. It's not a general broadcast. Will that change the way some of these labels or restrictions are put in place because it's no longer a blanket application? There's less gallons per acre, less, or you know what I mean, as far as that goes.
I mean, yeah, with regard to any of these public policies like the additional measures for endangered species, to a certain extent, it may change what from a point value and concern about drift and runoff, but ultimately the species are where the species are. Right now we can, and various groups have disagreed about where species are and how strict we need to be, but I don't think we necessarily change that. It may just make it a hair easier to comply, right? Legally, you don't have to keep those records. Now, you will get a point, one of those mitigation points, just for keeping those records, but it's in your best interest. I mean, we know that the desire for transparency and traceability is as high as it's ever been, and so you're going to want to have a record of how you got to those points just to be always able to go back to it. But I think some of the technologies that are coming along will certainly make it a bit easier, and that's where we look at this process is how does it evolve? How can you tweak it and make it to advance with new technology?
That's great. Well, I don't have any more questions.
I have
today.
one final wrap-up question, maybe just for fun as we kind of put a bow on this conversation. Either what are you most excited about here for 2025 or what are you most focused on?
Oh my gosh. As we're always getting started to the year, it's like, hey, what's going to happen? So when I think about what we do at HPG is like being able to bring solutions to growers that are actually applicable and make a difference on your operation. So it's going to be exciting to see exactly how all 2025 rolls out for us. So we're off to a good start. So we're excited about what 2025 has.
And I think 2024 was a challenging year, and I think we have to approach 25 with optimism. We know that we may see some reduced pressures. There may be some benefits to the new administration coming in and some of the aid that's going out to the farmer community. Definitely some other things going on that we sit there and go, how are we going to address those? But I think the farmer has to enter every season optimistic. We can't go in here March 4th, March 5th and say, hey, this is going to be a bad year, right? We want to approach it with optimism. I think there's a lot of opportunity moving forward. A lot of the technology we've seen here at the show, a lot of the stuff that Helena Products Group and others are putting forth, we're trying to give farmers every chance to gain that advantage. So we're looking forward to it.
Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate you sitting down here, getting out of bed bright and early to come and talk to us. If our listeners want to learn more or potentially connect with you, how best do they do that?
Well, you could always come to one of our local stores in your area or visit helenaagri.com.
Very great. Thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Tanner, I know we keep talking about that. We had a lot of conversations at Commodity Classic, but we sure did. We're excited to share those as these next few weeks. But as we look at the fertilizer markets, tell me more.
Yeah, the tariff war has had a major focus on our markets this week, as we discussed earlier. Josh Linville of StoneX highlighted that the U.S. heavily relies on fertilizer imports from Canada, with 87% of the potash coming from there. While much attention has also been placed on the dependence, it doesn't paint the full picture. Canadian retaliation tariffs on U.S. goods could, in turn, negatively impact Canadian farmers, particularly in this phosphate sector. Additionally, after an extended period of bullish trends, urea prices have finally cooled down for now. We'll continue to keep an eye on those fertilizer markets for you here on Ag News Daily. As far as grains go, we did see a little bit of a rebound on the soybean side in hopes that the Canadian and Mexico tariffs would subside. And of course, like ebony and ivory, Michelle, corn and soybeans can play in this market together. It'll be interesting to see what next week brings to our listeners as well.
Yeah, I can't believe it's March. So spring planting in the Midwest is right around the corner. So I know next week it may be a little warmer temperature, so people may want to get into the fields really, really close here.
That's right. And I know some of you will be headed out on spring break over the next 2 weeks. Make sure you connect with us on our social media platforms and tag where you're listening to Ag News Daily from. We'd love to see where your trips go, and maybe we can live vicariously through them, Michelle.
Yeah. And while trade show mix season kind of is over, we'll continue to update you weekly on Ag News Daily. So a lot of good conversations, like mentioned, but really good to be out in Denver, Colorado this week.
That's right. Well, for today, I think it's time to let the listeners go.
Let's let them go.